Have you ever had a favorite chair? A place that is yours and yours alone, where the very cushions seem to have molded to your shape. Now imagine an anger so possessive, so profoundly petty, that even in death, you would not allow another soul to rest in that spot. Most grudges fade with the final breath, but some are so potent, so steeped in rage, that they can poison the very wood and fabric of an object, turning a simple piece of furniture into a silent, patient, and brutally efficient executioner. This is the story of such a chair, and the violent man who refused to give up his seat. Our tale begins in the rugged, windswept landscape of North Yorkshire, England. In the year 1702, the man at the center of our story is not a tragic hero, but a villain named Thomas Busby. Busby was a notorious local drunkard, a brawler, and a coiner, a forger of currency, a crime punishable by death. He was a man of savage temper and few redeeming qualities. He lived with his wife, Elizabeth, whose father, Daniel Oddie, was a respectable man who deeply disapproved of his daughter's volatile and criminal husband. The object of our story is a simple, sturdy, unadorned oak chair. It resided in the local inn, which would one day be renamed the Busby Stoop Inn in his honor. This chair was not special in its design, but it was special to Thomas Busby. It was his chair. It was his throne in the small, squalid kingdom of his life. In this specific seat, he would drink, conduct his illegal business, and hold court over his fellow patrons. No one else dared to sit in it. It was a symbol of his petty dominance, and he was pathologically possessive of it. The tragic series of events began one fateful evening when Daniel Oddie, fed up with Busby's abuse of his daughter, came to the inn to bring Elizabeth home. An argument, fueled by ale and long-simmering resentment, erupted between the two men. Oddie, perhaps in a moment of defiance or simple weariness, made a fatal mistake. He sat down in Thomas Busby's favorite chair. To Busby, this was not just an insult. It was a declaration of war, a violation of his sacred territory. Blinded by a possessive, murderous rage, Busby threw his father-in-law out of the inn. Later that night, his fury still burning, he went to Oddie's home and brutally murdered him with a hammer. The crime was not one of passion, but of pure, vindictive spite. The reason was not money or love, but the violation of his favorite seat. Busby's small, hateful world had been challenged, and he had responded with savage violence. He was quickly arrested, tried, and sentenced to hang for his crime. As he was being led to the gallows at a crossroads near the inn, Busby was granted a final request: one last drink at his favorite pub. As he stood, chains on his wrists, and drained his final tankard of ale, he turned his furious gaze upon the empty oak chair sitting in its usual spot. With his last breath, he did not ask for forgiveness or show a hint of remorse. Instead, he spat a venomous curse upon the object of his obsession, roaring the words for all to hear. May sudden death come to anyone who dares sit in my chair. The curse was laid. Busby was hanged. His body left to rot in a gibbet at the crossroads as a warning to other criminals. But his malevolent spirit, it seems, did not move on. It clung to the last thing he had truly cared about, his simple wooden chair. The chair remained in the pub, a morbid curiosity. For many years, people avoided it, mindful of the final words of the hanged murderer. But as time passed, memory faded, and the curse was dismissed as the final, impotent rambling of a condemned man. And that is when the deaths began. The first recorded victim of the curse was a chimney sweep. In the 1890s, he and a friend, after a long day's work, stopped at the inn for a drink. The friend dared him to sit in the infamous Busby's chair. The chimney sweep, drunk and brave, laughed and took the dare. Plopping down into the seat, he finished his drink and left, seemingly unharmed. The next morning, he was found dead, having fallen from a roof. It was a tragic accident, people said. A coincidence. Decades passed. During World War II, the inn became a popular spot for pilots from the nearby airbase. The chair was a source of local legend, a piece of macabre folklore. A group of young, cocky Royal Air Force pilots, full of the bravado of youth and war, would dare each other to sit in it. It became a grim observation among the locals that the pilots who sat in the chair never returned from their next mission. They were shot down, their planes crashing in flames. Again, it was wartime. Death was common. Coincidence? The legend grew stronger, its roots digging deeper into the local consciousness. In the 1960s, a pair of builders came into the pub for lunch. One of them, seeing the empty chair, decided to sit in it. His friend warned him of the curse, but the man just laughed. A few hours later, as they were working on a nearby construction site, the man who had sat in the chair fell through a hole in the roof and was killed instantly. The chair had claimed another victim, its curse still as potent as the day it was uttered. The pub's landlord was now deeply troubled. He tried to hide the chair in the cellar, hoping to keep his patrons safe. But even in the dark, damp cellar, its influence was felt. A deliveryman making a drop-off saw the chair in the corner and, needing a rest, sat down for just a moment. Later that day, his delivery truck inexplicably swerved off the road and crashed into a tree, killing him. The landlord realized he couldn't just hide the chair. It needed to be contained. He had to get it out of his pub. In 1972, the terrified landlord donated the chair to the Thirsk Museum, a small, local institution dedicated to preserving the town's history. He made one non-negotiable condition: that the chair be displayed in such a way that no one could ever sit in it again. The museum agreed, and so the chair of death was hung by thick, sturdy chains, 5 feet up on a plain brick wall. a piece of cursed furniture transformed into a harmless historical exhibit. Or so they thought. This brings our story to a young, ambitious podcaster named Liam. Liam hosted a show called Folklore or Fact, in which he traveled to locations of famous myths and legends, attempting to find rational, scientific explanations for supernatural phenomena. He was a professional skeptic, a debunker of ghosts and curses. When he heard the story of Busby's chair, he saw the perfect subject for a new episode. He saw a classic case of confirmation bias, a series of unrelated tragedies linked together by a good story. He traveled to Thirsk, ready to expose the truth. Liam began his investigation at the Busby Stoop Inn, which was now a modern pub, but one that still honored its dark history. He spoke to the locals, who shared the old stories with a mixture of amusement and genuine fear. He then went to the Thirsk Museum. The museum was a quiet, dusty place, filled with the mundane artifacts of local life. And then he saw it, hanging on the wall, suspended like a hunting trophy, was the chair. It was simple, dark, and profoundly unassuming. It looked like any other old oak chair, and yet it felt different. As Liam stood before it, setting up his camera and audio equipment, he felt a strange, unexpected sensation. It was a coldness that had nothing to do with the room's temperature, and with the cold came a feeling of profound, irrational irritation. He felt annoyed by the presence of other museum patrons, by the sound of their footsteps, by the way they looked at the chair. He felt a bizarre, possessive anger, as if they were trespassing on his territory. He shook his head, dismissing the feeling as a psychological effect of immersing himself in the legend. He interviewed the museum curator, an elderly woman who spoke of the chair in hushed, respectful tones. She told him that even though no one could sit in it, its influence was still felt. Staff members often reported a feeling of being watched in that specific gallery. Cleaners would complain of a sudden, oppressive sadness and anger that would wash over them when they were near it. She told him quite seriously that the chair was not just an object. It was a vessel for a very old, very stubborn, and very hateful grudge. Intrigued and still deeply skeptical, Liam arranged for a private, after-hours visit to the museum. He wanted to conduct his own paranormal investigation, to take EMF readings and record audio in the dead of night, to prove that the only thing haunting the gallery was an overactive imagination. The museum, after he signed a lengthy waiver, agreed. As the last employee locked him in for the night, the heavy silence of the old building settled around him, a silence that felt ancient and watchful. He began his investigation in other parts of the museum, finding nothing. The building was quiet, his equipment silent, but as he approached the gallery where the chair was hung, his EMF meter, which had been dormant, suddenly crackled to life, its needle jumping into the red. A wave of cold Stagnant air washed over him. He started an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon session, asking questions into the darkness, his digital recorder running. Is anyone here? Thomas Busby, are you here? He played back the audio. In between his own questions, there was a sound he had not heard with his own ears. It was a faint, raspy, guttural whisper, a voice that sounded like it was being dragged across gravel. It spoke only a few chillingly clear words in a thick, archaic Yorkshire accent. My chair. Liam's blood ran cold. This was not something he could easily explain away. It was a direct, intelligent response. The first chink in his armor of skepticism appeared. A new feeling began to creep over him, overriding his fear. It was that same possessive anger he had felt earlier, but now it was 100 times stronger. He looked at the chair, hanging there on the wall, and felt an overwhelming, insane urge to get it down. It looked wrong, he thought. It looked like a prisoner, a chair like that wasn't meant to be hung on a wall. It was meant to be sat in. It was meant to be his. The thought was completely irrational, alien. And yet, it felt like the most important thing in the world. He fought the urge, his rational mind battling against this intrusive, malevolent impulse. He began to feel a splitting headache, a pressure building behind his eyes. He heard a sound from the other side of the gallery, the heavy, rhythmic tread of hobnailed boots on old wooden floorboards. The sound grew closer, circling the room, the footsteps of an unseen, angry man pacing in the dark. Liam was no longer an investigator. He was an intruder, and the owner of the house had come home. The confrontation was not with a visible specter, but with an overwhelming, oppressive psychic force. The anger in the room was a palpable entity, a crushing weight of pure, murderous rage. Liam felt his own personality begin to recede, replaced by the hateful, petty consciousness of Thomas Busby. He saw flashes of a bar fight, the glint of a hammer, the satisfying crunch of a skull. He felt the burning resentment for his father-in-law, the fury at seeing him in his seat. He felt the cold rope around his own neck, and the final, triumphant curse leaving his lips. He was losing himself. He looked at his own hands, and they seemed like foreign objects, thick and calloused, ready for violence. He looked at the chair, and the desire to possess it, to claim it, to kill for it, was now his entire world. He finally understood the true nature of the curse. It wasn't just that sitting in the chair would kill you. The true horror was that the chair's malevolence could reach out, infect you, and turn you into a reflection of the man who had cursed it. It didn't just break your body, it twisted your soul in a final, desperate act of self-preservation. Liam did the one thing he could think of to break the connection. He turned his back on the chair. He forced himself to walk away, his feet feeling like lead, every step a monumental battle against the chair's psychic pull. He stumbled out of the gallery, the angry, booted footsteps and the guttural whispers following him. He collapsed against the museum's main entrance, fumbling for his phone, and called the emergency contact number. His voice a hoarse, terrified whisper, begging to be let out. The curator arrived, her face a mask of concern and weary understanding. She found Liam pale and trembling, his eyes wide with a terror she had seen in others before. He couldn't articulate what had happened, only mumbling incoherently about footsteps and a terrible, consuming anger. He gathered his equipment and left Thirsk that night, not as a victorious skeptic with a debunked myth, but as a terrified survivor fleeing a battle he had barely understood, let alone won. Liam never produced the episode on Busby's chair. He abandoned the project, and soon after, he abandoned his podcast altogether. The experience had broken something inside him. The man who had once confidently strode into haunted locations with an array of scientific equipment was now a nervous, anxious recluse. He had touched the third rail of the supernatural and had been left permanently scarred by the jolt. He had sought to explain a legend, but instead, the legend had explained a terrible, dark truth to him. The curse had followed him home, but not in the way he expected. He was not killed in a freak accident. Instead, his personality was forever stained by Busby's rage. He became prone to fits of irrational anger, especially if someone touched his things without asking. He became obsessively attached to a specific armchair in his own living room, a chair he now thinks of as his chair. He feels a flash of violent rage if a guest even thinks of sitting in it. The curse had not killed him. It had planted a seed of itself within him. He lives in a state of constant, low-grade paranoia, forever fighting the echoes of Busby's hateful consciousness in his own mind. He got rid of all his other chairs, but he can't bring himself to get rid of his favorite one. He both loves and fears it. He understands now that he did not escape unscathed. He had trespassed, and the guardian of that wooden throne had marked him, making him a reluctant, terrified warden of his own personal cursed chair. And the original chair, it still hangs on the wall in the Thirsk Museum. It has not been sat in for decades. It is silent, dormant, and waiting. The chains that hold it 5 feet off the ground are not just a safety precaution for the public. They are a quarantine. They are the bars of a cage, holding not just a piece of furniture, but a contained 300-year-old moment of pure, undiluted, and murderous rage. The curse is not dead. It is merely patient. The story of Thomas Busby and his chair serves as a chilling reminder that the most powerful hauntings are not always born of tragedy or sorrow. Sometimes the most potent, most stubborn, and most dangerous ghosts are born of the simplest, ugliest, and most human of emotions. Pure, petty, possessive rage. There is no great injustice to be righted, no lost soul to be put to rest. There is only a hateful man who refused to give up his seat. even in death. The legend has now taken on a life of its own in the digital age. Photos and videos of the chair are all over the internet. People stare at its image, read its story, and feel a vicarious thrill. But they are still, in a small way, interacting with it. And one has to wonder if a curse so potent, a grudge so strong, is truly confined to the physical wood of the chair. Can its influence now travel through a screen, through a story, planting a tiny, dark seed of possessiveness in the minds of those who hear its tale? What makes an object cursed? Is it the last words of a dying man? Or is it the sheer force of the emotion he poured into it at the moment of his death? Perhaps the curse is not a supernatural decree, but an emotional echo and psychic stain left on the world, a recording of a hateful moment that plays over and over again for anyone who gets too close to the source. The chair is not possessed by a ghost. It is possessed by a grudge. So the next time you claim a favorite spot on the couch, or tell someone, "Hey, you're in my seat," perhaps you should smile when you say it, because somewhere, hanging on a wall in a quiet English museum, is a simple oak chair that serves as a permanent, terrifying monument to what can happen when that simple, possessive thought is fueled by a heart full of pure, unrepentant, and eternal malice. It is a story that proves that the most terrifying final words are not a plea for forgiveness, but a promise of revenge.